You're a grand old flag, you're a high-flying flag, and forever in episode 116, may you wave. Welcome, everybody, to episode 116 of Movies You Miss podcast. This is going to be a patriotic episode. I'm very excited for it. Vee, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, John. Happy Independence Day. I'm very excited to get into both of these films that are extremely relevant to the topic, but very different from each other.
Absolutely. I'm very excited as well, since I have never seen your pick, and you had not seen mine in at least 10 or 15 years, if I remember correctly.
That is correct.
Wonderful. So again, welcome everybody to Movies You Miss podcast. Like I said, this is episode 116. If you are a brand new listener to Movies You Miss podcast, we are John and Vee, veterans of the entertainment industry. We have also been friends for 25 years, and today is going to be a very patriotic episode, and I can't wait to get into it. Last week, we honored the great Canadian actor Donald Sutherland. This week, we honor our country in more ways than one. But before we do that, a little bit about us other than who we are as people. We also do not spoil any movies here at Movies You Miss podcast, have not in 115 episodes, and will continue that for the next 115, and so on. And unfortunately, this week, Vee and I did not make it to the theaters or watch anything on streaming over the last week.
A rarity for us.
I know, this is my second week, and I'm really not enjoying it. I really want to go to the movies. I just have not cared about anything.
I know, we are failing our audience, but it's a real dry spell out there right now.
Yeah, so I know Kinds of Kindness will actually be released here this Friday, so I'm going to go see that first showing Friday.
It's a good trailer.
I haven't even seen the trailer. I just know who's in it and who directed it, so I'm all in.
Which is Emma Stone and the director of Poor Things.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I've been hearing good things.
Bet it'll be weird as hell, and you'll tell me all about it.
Probably. And I think it's time to jump into this week's movies for this episode. And unfortunately, I did not experience Vee's pick in the theaters, but I did experience it at home in a very quiet environment. So I'm very excited to get into Vee's pick this week. Vee, you want to take it away?
Thank you so much for that intro. I absolutely do. When we were discussing the theme for this episode, 4th of July, and of course, John's natural pick for this episode, I really wanted to take it in a little bit of a different direction and do a different interpretation of what it means to be patriotic and celebrating our country.
Yeah.
And from there, I immediately thought of this film. I'd seen it twice in my 20s. It was very impactful. It really, beyond Mission Impossible, made me a Tom Cruise fan in terms of respecting him as an actor. Because I hadn't seen him like this in any other role previously.
Sure.
And I was deeply impressed, and it also made me an Oliver Stone fan.
Ah, okay.
And coming from parents who have a history of protests and activism, we actually marched in an anti-Iraq war protests in the early 2000s, right when I was graduating high school.
Oh, wow.
And so I've experienced this type of activism as well in my home. But on the flip side, I also come from a military family. My uncles were in the military. Most of my grandma's side of the family has been in the military. And in fact, I was a military contractor for multiple years. And so Born on the 4th of July, it really spoke to me as a movie. And so without further ado, and I should stop delaying this, the title of the movie that I picked this week is Born on the 4th of July. It's listed as a 1989 movie, but in fact it was released on January 5th of 1990.
Ah.
And this movie is actually a biopic. It's based on a book by Ron Kovic, who was actually born on the 4th of July in 1946.
Yeah.
He and Oliver Stone sat down in a cafe together in Venice Beach and wrote the screenplay to this film.
Oh, no way.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Oliver Stone had wanted to make this film for nearly 10 years. Al Pacino was rumored to be part of it for a little while, and thank God that didn't happen, honestly, because I don't think that's a good fit at all.
No.
And Tom Cruise had gotten into Oliver Stone's orbit because he was interested in being the lead in one of Oliver's first movies called Wall Street.
Oh, yeah.
He had already offered that role to Charlie Sheen. And so when Oliver was writing the script to this movie, he actually pictured Tom Cruise in the role. And Tom was his first choice. And in a rare turn of events, it actually doesn't happen that often, the director's first choice for lead actually accepted the role. And that's how we got Tom Cruise starring in Born on the 4th of July.
Awesome.
And this movie opens up in the 50s when Ron Kovic is a young boy. He's growing up in Massapequa, New York, which is on Long Island. This is a very Americana opening. There's parades, there's the classic playing in the woods, having your first crush, and it very beautifully glides along through different scenes of his childhood as he's growing up. All these kids turn into teens and young adults. You see Tom Cruise for the first time. He's a wrestling star. He's active. He's a child of very religious parents. They end up having 6 kids, and he's the oldest.
Yeah.
And they sit down to watch John F. Kennedy's famous speech of ask not what your country can do for you, but instead what you can do for your country. And that really inspires Ron. And so as teens in the early 60s, when Vietnam starts ramping up, they all start talking about how important it is for them to go over there.
And he said that there's going to be a big war over there in, what is it?
Vietnam.
Vietnam. And he said that the Marines are going to be the first ones in and ain't going to last too long.
That's right, so if we don't sign up soon, we're gonna miss it. I've already decided I'm going in.
Really? Just like that?
Yeah, I'm not waiting. I'm going in now.
Come on, Ronnie, you're crazy.
No, you're crazy. Our dads got to go to WW2. This is our chance to do something. To be part of history, guys.
Yeah, just like our dads.
You should think about what you're doing, you know, Ronnie? Come on. It could be dangerous over there, you know? You could get yourself killed. Did you ever think about that? Where you going, squirrel head? College? Well, I want to do something with my life. Yeah, I can get a degree in business administration.
Yeah, and you don't think you need to serve your country?
Don't care about anybody but yourself? Huh? Better dead than red.
I got missiles pointed at us everywhere. ICBMs.
They're coming in all around us.
Cuba now, 90 miles away.
Ronnie, they're taking over the
Yeah,
whole
when
world.
are we gonna stop them, huh?
Ronnie, you ain't Superman. You can't stop him all by
No
yourself.
theory. Communism is moving in everywhere.
Oh,
guys.
yeah, sure. Where, Ronnie? I don't see them. They're not right here in Massapequa, so I'm just going to take care of number one. No, that's right, Timmy. Me, Stevie, number one.
Stevie, it's okay. Because someone's got to stay home with the women and children while the men go do the fighting.
That's right. Cousin nuts. And I'm getting out of here. All I'm saying is you should just think about it, you know? Just think about it, Ronnie.
And one of the reasons why I really love this movie, or at least it really resonated with me when I first watched it in my 20s, is that my dad was born right around the same time Ron Kovic was. And he was also given this, for lack of a better term, propaganda about Vietnam.
Sure.
And he was all gung-ho about going over there and fighting for our country. And actually, one of his history teachers in high school took him aside and started asking him questions. Why do you think we should go over there? Why do you think they're a threat to the United States? And really just dug into what my dad had been told. And it really changed my dad's idea of what that war was and what it was about and what we were doing over there. And it made it so he wasn't interested in signing up for military service anymore.
No way.
Yeah, and so my dad instead got a draft number, and actually after my oldest sister was born, his draft number changed to a much higher number, so he was safe,
wow.
thankfully.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of stories about this time period from my father, since that's when he was growing up, and the classic story about how, similar to you and I growing up during the Iraq and Afghani war, but especially Iraq, being sold a bill of goods that isn't entirely true.
Right. Yeah.
And that's really what the beginning of this movie is all about, because Ron Kovic signs up for the Marines. He's so excited. I mean, especially because the recruiter is Tom Berenger, which of course you know.
Well, yeah, during the end credits, I was like, there he is, Inception. I could not place him at the time while watching the movie, but I was like, I've seen this guy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he's a great 80s actor. I really liked him in this one movie called Sniper with Billy Zane.
Oh, okay.
He's been in a bunch of stuff in the 80s and early 90s, and so Ron gets recruited, he signs up for the Marines, and he actually is one of the earlier troops sent over, because this is, again, early 60s.
Yeah.
And for anybody who remembers, Vietnam went to 1975.
It's so insane.
Yes, it is.
Just hope they send you to Europe or Korea or
They can't.
someplace safe.
Every Marine has a tour of duty over there. It's not like the Army. And what's the matter with you anyway? Huh? You served? Uncle Bob served?
I know, Ronnie, I know.
And what, don't you remember what President Kennedy said? There's not going to be an America anymore unless there are people who are willing to sacrifice. I love my country, Dad.
I know, Ronnie, I know.
You're right, Ronnie. You're doing the right thing. Communism has to be stopped. It's God's will you go. I'm proud of you. You know, be careful, that's all.
Up there in Hanoi, they don't allow magazines and newspapers and televisions to cast doubts on the system. The military system. That's something we
Don't you know what it means to me to be a Marine, Dad? Ever since I was a kid, I've wanted this. I wanted to serve my country, and I want to go. I want to go to Vietnam. And I'll die there if I have to.
And now we are in Vietnam, and we see that Ron has been on 2 tours. He's a lot calmer now, or at least quieter.
Yeah.
He definitely seems battle-hardened at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And he's having this conversation with a new guy from Georgia in his squad. And he seems like the seasoned guy, oh, don't worry, he's calming down the new guy. I don't know anybody from Georgia who's ever been hurt before. You're fine. And then, of course, they come upon this village, and what we now know about Vietnam, which is it was super messy, a lot of really bad intel, and it turns out his entire squad accidentally kills a bunch of civilians.
Ugh. Oh, my God. That did me in so hard.
I think it's a good time now to tell everyone this is a very hard movie to watch.
Oh, absolutely.
It is unapologetic in its critique of the war, how military service is sold to people, and that's because Oliver Stone is also a Vietnam vet.
Is he really?
That's why he has this war trilogy that he's made that I'll talk about in a little bit.
Okay. I don't think I knew that when I first watched Platoon.
Yeah, that will put a new lens on it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Good Lord.
Yeah. And after this heartbreaking incident, Ron and his squad continue to move along Vietnam, searching for the quote-unquote enemy.
Yeah.
And at one point, they're in a very large field, walking through it, and they get ambushed. And this is actually where Ron gets shot.
That was the first time watching this movie that I screamed at the TV.
Probably not the last, though.
No, it definitely wasn't.
Okay.
But
I wouldn't
right
think
when
so.
that bullet hits, I was like, fuck! Like,
Yeah.
I was just, I grabbed my wife's leg. She was playing her video game. She wasn't really paying too much attention, but again, another moment of the movie that completely did me in.
This movie is graphic, but for the right reasons. It's not gratuitous in any way, shape, or form, but it's extremely raw. Because then Ron is transported via helicopter to a field hospital, which is the first of many horrors that he experiences. And then he's transferred to a VA hospital back in the States, which is my idea of hell.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? Watching this movie, I feel like that's where Terry Gilliam got the inspiration for the mental hospital for 12 Monkeys.
Very similar vibes. Wholeheartedly agree with you. Yeah.
Very much just fucked and dirty and not run very well.
No resources. And as 2 lifelong medical patients, that is one of the most terrifying ideas for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Watching this movie, horrible.
Horrible.
Absolutely horrible.
And Ron ends up spending about a year there because he's been shot through the front of his chest, and it came in at an angle from about his right shoulder and went through his back.
The moment when his fellow soldier runs up and picks him up and runs him through that field while everybody is still firing, I felt like I was there. Like, I just felt like I was on the back of that guy running away from all of the mayhem and just watching stuff go down that I could not contribute to. It's one of those moments in this movie and in so many other movies and just in life when you feel completely and utterly helpless.
Oliver Stone does do a really good job of making this movie visceral.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I've always liked that about Oliver Stone movies.
And the reason Ron ends up spending nearly a year in the hospital is because, in fact, his T6 vertebrae has been basically obliterated. And he's paralyzed from the chest down. Because Ron is a virile young man, he was a wrestling champion, he was extremely active.
Yeah.
He is in complete denial. And he struggles a lot in this year in this hospital. And he's finally let out and goes back home, and his family has built a ramp for him at the front of his house, and people welcome him back. And for a moment, he seems like he's going to be okay. But the feeling of being an outsider starts to slowly creep into his vision. The reality of this being his life now is settling in as well. And Ron starts to really struggle, and the rest of the movie is about Ron coming to terms with his injury, his experiences, what he did in the war, how people are treating him now that he's home, and what he was told by our government about this war.
Yeah.
And so now comes the part that I've been waiting for several days for. Because apparently Misery loves company, and John has started refusing to tell me what he thinks about his first watches of my picks.
Yes, it seems that has bled over into both of our sides of watching movies for this podcast.
And so, John, how was your first experience watching Born on the 4th of July?
Great. Great question, V. I am not the biggest Oliver Stone fan, although I do like Natural Born Killers. I am a fan of Alexander. I know that our audience may remember that or may not. This movie might be my favorite Oliver Stone film that he's ever made. This movie and every performance is absolutely spectacular. This is the Tom Cruise movie. This is Tom Cruise as an actor, right? Not an action star as Ethan Hunt, not an action star in Edge of Tomorrow, Oblivion, not even the cameo in Tropic Thunder. This is Tom Cruise bringing it from the dirt, just completely encapsulating this guy's life. Absolutely amazing. I usually get pretty worked up in a movie after I've seen it already one time. You know, like you kind of know what's going on.
You know what's coming.
You know what's coming, so you can kind of prepare yourself, which is a weird thing. I'm sure everybody does this because we're all human. But I got so choked up and worked up throughout this entire 2.5 hours, especially after he comes home and his whole neighborhood is like, "You look great, Ron. You look great, Ron. So good to have you home." He's in the wheelchair, and then he's trying to figure out what he's going to do with his time now that he's back from Vietnam. Everything in Vietnam just infuriated me because of why that whole war went down. Just makes absolutely no sense, even to anybody today. You watch Apocalypse Now, and that's still one of the most fucked Vietnam movies and, character pieces that's ever been put to film. The fact that this is based on a memoir of this guy, I gotta read it. I have to.
Yes,
after seeing this movie. This is a must read. However, again, going back to the movie itself, Oliver Stone and Ron Kovic, amazing screenplay. I mean, this is written incredibly well. Every shot in this movie is a complete and utter painting of misery and sorrow and human destruction. I fucking love this movie. I love it.
I'm so happy.
When it ended, Amy was like, "What?" I told you this earlier, but Amy said to me, "Are you doing a depressing movie too?" I'm like, "No, I'm doing Independence Day." And my wife was like, "Oh, okay." Because how do you match a movie like this for our 4th of July episode? I've heard the name of this movie, Born on the 4th of July, Tom Cruise great, Oliver Stone great. We've all come to know Oliver Stone is not shy. He likes to really put you there. He likes to throw it in your face. I thought Born on the 4th of July was just like, oh, that's just going to be the name. Like, maybe that's his, rebirth, right? Like, after he goes through what he goes through. No, the fact that he's born literally on the 4th of July brings it home. And his father, his mother, his siblings, especially when he comes back and they're sitting around the dinner table and his brother's like, "Well, that was a stupid war." And he goes, "What?" And he's like wheeling around the table and he's like, "Mom, do you hear this? Dad, do you hear this?" All of that was just like, oh.
Love her to leave it. Love her to leave it, Tommy.
Like, love her to leave this country. Yeah, it's like, man. And then when he's at the bar and he's getting drunk and then he comes home and he starts screaming at his mother about the fact that he's paralyzed and he can't do anything other than use his arms and his head. And I was completely involved. I loved this movie. This is, and I love Tropic Thunder. No, this is my favorite Tom Cruise performance in the history of Tom Cruise films that I've ever seen. He completely turned me into a believer of not only is he a great action star, again, Mission Impossible, Edge of Tomorrow, Oblivion, Top Gun. No, he's an actor. And this movie made me even more excited to rewatch Top Gun, Top Gun Maverick, Edge of Tomorrow, Oblivion, Mission Impossible series, etc. He's a fucking master. And holy shit, this movie is a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. And I need to own this movie and watch it probably every year and just sit here and cry. The moment when his sergeant is screaming at him, "You see the rifles? You see the rifles?" And you can see in his face the uncertainty, but he's just like, yeah. I see him. That just completely destroyed me because 5 minutes later we see what happens and then what he is living with and then his post-traumatic stress and all of that when he's back home. Just, I don't know if I've seen a better war movie after now watching this movie. As much as I love Saving Private Ryan and Black Hawk Down, which I've done on this podcast, and so many other war movies, Fury, this movie, yeah, I just fucking loved it. I loved it.
Thank you for voicing my feelings so articulately I'm thrilled that you love this movie. It is the go-to film that I have been telling people for over a decade whenever they say Tom Cruise isn't a good actor.
Oh, all right. Yeah, no, for sure.
It is the standard for me in terms of his talent, and I'm so thrilled that it impacted you as much as it did.
Oh, yeah.
Especially because it's a true story.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that might be another reason why it's so impactful. You know, like I said, that moment when he is drunk and goes home and starts screaming at his mother, and she's like, I can't do this anymore. And he's like, yeah, I don't need to get too graphic into the dialogue because it's really fucked up and it's twisted. But it's like, dude, totally. Like, I would be completely in that mindset, like, if I had come back. Yeah, no, oh, man. It was a gut punch of a 2.5 hour movie, but again, I'm so grateful that I have finally seen this movie. It might have happened in the future, but this podcast, again, as we've said in several other episodes in the past, that's the beauty of this podcast, is we're introducing each other to movies that we've never seen. So I'm very glad that I've seen this movie. And like I said, this is the Tom Cruise performance that ends all Tom Cruise performances.
And I love that Vietnam is only at the halfway point of this film.
Right. Yeah. No, it's utilized enough, and it's not gratuitous, you know? Now, granted, I use the word gratuitous a little bit loosely because it gets really...
It's graphic, not gratuitous, right?
Yeah, it's very, very graphic, but... And I guess I use gratuitous in the graphic sense, but it's similar to the movie Munich that Steven Spielberg directed with Eric Bana many, many years ago. Great movie. I read an article. It was like, this movie is a perfect example of what killing does to good people.
Yeah.
And it's like, this movie is exactly that fucking description.
Yeah.
Absolutely. 100%.
And the commentary on America is so integral to this story, but not beating you over the head with it.
Right.
In the beginning with Tom Berenger saying, America has never lost a war. And I'm like, fuck, you're right. In the early 60s, America hadn't ever lost a war. So
we were the be-all, end-all.
Confident you would be of like, oh yeah, well, we need to go to Vietnam. Cool, we're going to kick ass over there and we're going to come home and be heroes. Fine.
Right.
Right? And having no concept whatsoever of what's going to happen over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And him just echoing all of the talking points for Vietnam when he's getting ready to go over there.
Yeah.
And his evolution as a character and as a person, you empathize so much with him and these other soldiers where they come back and all of these anti-war protesters are screaming at them.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, it really is shitty. And they're screaming, you're a baby killer and, you know, you're a murderer. And what do you do with that when you are, in fact, a murderer? When you are, in fact, a baby killer, right?
When you've experienced that firsthand, it's so
not
tough.
your fault. In fact, you're just a kid from high school who was sold this bill of goods.
Right. Absolutely.
And by the end of this movie, it's crazy to say, but it's so incredibly uplifting.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I was actually very happy with the end of the movie. I was very happy that it didn't fade into title cards or you know,
just
anything
explaining
like that.
what happened.
Yeah, it ends the way it ends, and I was like, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, thank you for not being a cliche ending in, you know, regards to honoring Ron Kovic's life or, you know, trying to sensationalize anything. And that's another reason why Oliver Stone is who he is. But man, yeah, it is just like, oh my gosh. I unfortunately rented it on Apple, but I got to tell you, I would have watched it immediately the next day just to
I'm so happy.
Make sure that I had everything that I absorbed from this movie, but I have not stopped thinking about it since last week. It's literally been haunting me.
I think that's the highest compliment you could give Tom and Oliver Stone because I think that was the whole point.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they did their job very well.
They did, and so did everybody else because there are a ton of actors in this film because there are so many different settings of this film. It's growing up in New York, Vietnam, coming back, and everybody's now older, so of course a new set of actors there. And then what happens to him after he gets back? He goes to many different places, and so he meets a ton of people. I mean, Kira Sedgwick plays his high school love interest, his sweetheart, as it were. Mm-hmm. And for those who know, she's married to Kevin Bacon. She starred in this TNT show called The Closer, which I loved. I used to watch it with my parents all the time. She also stars in the John Travolta movie Phenomenon.
Oh, yeah, that's a good movie.
She's also in a movie with her husband called Murder in the First. Christian Slater's in it, too. It's a really fucked up film in terms of it being very, very intense, but it's very good. It definitely affected me when I watched it in my early 20s. It's about prisoner abuse in the 40s and 50s. It's brutal.
Okay.
And like we said, Tom Berenger's in this film, Willem Dafoe, Tom Sizemore, Michael Wincott, Holly Marie Combs, and one of her first ever credits, she went on to be in the show Charmed.
Oh, that's right. Yes. When Amy was watching with me, she goes, Young Charmed.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, oh, yeah, okay. When she said that, yeah, I recognize her. I've never watched Charmed. But I did have a cardboard cutout of all the ladies from Charmed when I worked at the CW in my apartment because they're all very beautiful.
I'm sure you've always been in love with Melissa Milano.
Oh, yeah, and Rose McGowan.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And also 3 of the Baldwin brothers are in this film.
3? I
Yeah.
only recognize Steven.
Steven, of course, being in Vietnam, that's right. William Baldwin was in high school with him. And Daniel
wow.
Baldwin is, I believe, in the bar. Some scene when he's an adult, I remember that.
Okay.
Yeah, the only Baldwin brother that wasn't in the film was Alec.
All right.
And as you said, Oliver Stone directed this film. He has directed some fantastic films. He's not really directing anymore, and he's not making films as good as they used to be anymore, which is unfortunate because he made, as you said, Platoon, Wall Street 1 and 2. The second one had Shia LaBeouf in it. I remember seeing it in theaters.
I haven't seen any of the Wall Street movies.
The first one's good because it's a great commentary on the 80s and greed. The second one is extremely forgettable. He also directed The Doors with Val Kilmer.
Oh, yeah, I never saw that either. I heard that's a great one.
Speaking of great performances.
Yeah.
JFK, Natural Born Killers, Nixon, Any Given Sunday, Alexander, that you like.
I'm one of the only people on planet Earth.
Yeah, that's true. I think so. World Trade Center, W, Savages, which I actually like.
Savages was fine until the final, 4 minutes.
Yeah, it should have ended like the book.
I did not, I never read the book, but I did not like how Savages ended. I thought it was kind of stupid.
Until the final 4 minutes, that's how the book ends.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah. And his last major film was Snowden.
Oh, I did see Snowden with Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was all right. That wasn't bad.
And I'm going to get this out of the way right now. The word fuck is used 289 times in this film.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of times.
It's a lot of times. It might be the most of any film we've picked so far because it certainly passes Tropic Thunder.
I think so, and it might even pass Superbad.
I think it does because that was 238.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So this is 289. So prepare yourselves for the language as well as everything else that is really traumatizing in this film. And Oliver Stone, though, he really did his due diligence and really made this film with purpose because the entire film is shot in shades of red, white, and blue.
Oh, very cool.
It all depends on the emotional level of the scene, and so battle scenes are all in reddish hues.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Dream sequences are in white, and all of the sad scenes have a blue tone to them.
Very cool.
And Oliver filmed this movie in the same country he filmed Platoon, which is the Philippines.
Okay.
Because in the 80s, we still didn't have a good relationship with Vietnam. Even though he wanted to film over there, we couldn't go over there.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And as we've mentioned, Platoon is the first of his Vietnam trilogy. This is the second. Heaven and Earth is the third.
Oh, okay.
I haven't seen Heaven and Earth yet, but I feel like I need to now.
I have not either. Yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah. And at one point, Ron actually goes to Mexico when he's trying to figure out everything, basically.
Yeah.
And on a desk is the book All Quiet on the Western Front.
I noticed that.
It is, of course, considered to be one of the greatest anti-war books ever written. The most recent iteration of it won several Oscars.
Yes.
Watch it on Netflix if you haven't yet. And All Quiet on the Western Front is actually one of my all-time favorite books. So it's nice to see that.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. And during one of the anti-war demonstrations that Ron goes to, one of the speakers says that the Bronze Star and Purple Heart honors that he earned in Vietnam mean nothing to him, and he rips them off his chest. These are the same 2 honors that both Oliver Stone and the real Ron Kovic received serving in Vietnam.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
Yeah. So Oliver Stone is not a slouch. I mean, if you want a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart, he saw some shit, so no wonder he wanted to tell these stories.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he actually used other Vietnam vets for this film as well. The doctor who tells Ron about his paralysis is a real veteran of the Vietnam War.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's pretty badass.
Yeah. And Tom Cruise took this role extremely seriously. He looked into paralytic shots to see if he could actually paralyze himself for the duration of the filming so he could be more realistic.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
There weren't any safe methods of doing that, so he didn't. And
good.
Yeah, instead, for the duration of filming all of the scenes that Ron is paralyzed, Tom Cruise stayed and used his wheelchair off and on the set.
Wow.
And funny enough, Tom Cruise was actually born on July 3rd.
Whoa! Really?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. And his performance was so impactful and so good, and everybody agrees with what you've said and what you've and I have said about this performance. The real Ron Kovic gave Tom Cruise his Bronze Star for his performance in the movie.
Wow.
And in 1990, this film was considered to be a masterpiece back then, too.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's for sure.
Because of its critical look at America and the war, Universal was very nervous about this film.
Really?
They only gave it a $14 million budget.
Oh, whoa!
Most actors were not paid ahead of time.
Oh, my Lord.
In the U.S., this movie grossed $70 million. Worldwide, worldwide, on a $14 million budget, this movie grossed $161 million.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. And it was nominated for 8 Oscars.
Whoa.
Best score by John Williams.
No shit. I must have missed that when watching the credits.
It doesn't sound like him, which is
No, it doesn't.
why you wouldn't have initially thought he's the one who scored this film.
That is insane. I will say, though, I have heard the soundtrack before.
Yes, it is a popular
Yeah.
soundtrack.
It is, and it's gorgeous.
It's great. I actually just went to a performance by a symphony who played all of John Williams' big works just in the last couple weeks, and
Yeah.
I had such a good time. I was openly crying during the E.T. theme because I love it so much.
Perfect.
They didn't play the theme to this film, but I have recently experienced a lot of his themes, and I just had such a wonderful time. And it was actually the second time I've ever done something like that. The first time, God, was over 15 years ago now, and it was actually at the Hollywood Bowl, and he did the conducting.
Oh, that's cool.
And it was one of the best concerts I've ever been to in my entire life. It was unbelievable. Absolutely
That's
breathtaking.
awesome. I actually, one of the first things Amy and I ever did was go to the Hollywood Bowl to see 2001 with a live orchestra and
nice.
a choir. And then a few weeks later, we did E.T.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not John Williams, but it was still pretty fucking incredible.
It is. Anytime there's an opportunity, I know a lot of cities do this now, when they have the symphony playing live along with a movie, they show
yeah.
the movie on a big projector, and then in front of it is the symphony. Highly recommend it to anybody who's ever interested.
Absolutely.
In the fall, a lot of times they do Harry Potter and then Nightmare Before Christmas. There are a lot of really fun movies to do that too, and
yeah.
I recommend any opportunity you get to definitely buy tickets to it.
As do I.
Beyond score, it was also nominated for Best Sound, Best Screenplay, which is great and well-deserving.
Absolutely.
This was Tom Cruise's first ever Oscar nomination.
Awesome.
He was nominated for Best Actor. He's been nominated 4 times, 2 other times for acting, and then Top Gun Maverick was nominated for Best Picture 2 years ago, and since
there you go.
He was an executive producer, he got an Oscar nomination for that.
Perfect.
Yeah. It was also nominated for Best Picture, Best Cinematography for Robert Richardson.
Oh, wow. Wonderful.
I actually didn't know Robert Richardson by name as a cinematographer. However, all of us should, because these are some of his credits.
All right, here we go.
Sit back and brace yourself, John.
All right, I'm ready.
Platoon, Wall Street, 8 Men Out, which is the fantastic movie about the White Sox scandal in the World Series in the early 1900s when they all threw the game for betting.
I don't even know that story at all.
John Cusack's in it. It's a really good baseball movie. Oh, it's a baseball movie. I have to introduce you to it.
All right, well, then I'll probably like it.
Okay. The Doors, JFK, A Few Good Men, Natural Born Killers, Casino. The Horse Whisperer, which is directed by Robert Redford and is a gorgeous film. Kill Bill 1 and 2, Django Unchained, World War Z, The Hateful Eight, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Clearly,
oh my God.
He's been working with Quentin a lot.
Apparently.
Air, The Equalizer 3. The Aviator. Inglourious Bastards, Shutter Island, and Hugo.
Holy shit. Oh my God. What a fucking career.
Robert Richardson, we are officially giant fans of you. We have been fans for a long, long time and just never memorized your name until this moment.
Wow. Literally, that is like I'm like 97.8% a fan of all the movies that you just listed. Holy God.
And the other 2%,
wow.
it's because you haven't watched them yet.
Exactly. Yeah. Haven't heard of them or seen them. Yeah. No, that's amazing. Wow.
This movie won 2 Oscars.
Perfect.
It won for Best Editing.
Oh, I agree with that one.
David Brenner was the editor on this film. Born on the 4th of July was only his second ever film credit for editing.
Congrats to that.
He has edited...
Oh, here we go.
The Doors, The River Wild, which is an awesome Meryl Streep, Kevin Bacon movie that I really like.
I disagree that that's a good movie.
Oh, it's just like a fun Saturday afternoon movie. It's ridiculous, but it's fun.
I'll give you that much.
What Dreams May Come.
Oh.
Which is crazy timing.
Yeah.
The Patriot, Kate and Leopold, The Day After Tomorrow, World Trade Center, Wanted, 2012, which sucks, but still.
Yeah.
Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman.
That's too bad.
Both versions of the Justice League.
Okay.
And Avatar: The Way of Water.
No. Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh. Damn.
David Brenner, master editor.
That is some killer editing throughout the last 30. Oh God, we're in 2024. Last over 30 short from 40 years.
Yeah. And at 27, David Brenner was the youngest person to win the Academy Award for Best Film Editing.
That is badass.
He was also the youngest to ever even be nominated, tied with Robert Wise for Citizen Kane.
Hell yeah. Oh my gosh. Fantastic.
And we'll get back to David Brenner in just one second, but before I do, I want to tell you the second Oscar win for this film.
Yeah.
It was Best Director.
Oh, wonderful.
And Oliver Stone was presented his Best Director Oscar for this film by his former film school teacher, Martin Scorsese.
Oh! Damn! Wow, that is fucking killer.
And that is Born on the 4th of July, starring Tom Cruise, directed and written by Oliver Stone. Please watch it on Netflix as soon as you get a chance. It is, as John says, a masterpiece.
Yo, hell yeah. No, completely agree. Watch it on Netflix. I paid for it because I wanted a higher quality version of it. I loved every minute of it and also just was devastated by every minute of it. It is a wonderful, wonderful movie, and I really got to read the book that Ron Kovic wrote.
Right there with you. I'll read it. We can read it together.
There we go.
And now we're going to turn it over to John for his 4th of July movie.
Yeah.
And to lead it in, I will say that David Brenner would also serve as the film editor for your film this week.
Oh, man. I didn't get too much into the post-production on this one, so that is fucking killer. Oh, hell yeah. I'm ready. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Well, that's pretty badass because this movie, like I actually did mention just several minutes ago, comes to us from the year 1996. This movie is written by Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich, directed by Roland Emmerich, starring Will Smith, Jeff Goldblum, Bill Pullman, Harry Connick Jr., Judd Hirsch, Vivica A. Fox, Randy Quaid, Mary McDonald, Robert Loggia, and Brent Spiner. This is my second most favorite film of all time, Independence Day.
A movie I haven't seen in over 15 years.
I don't even understand how that's possible, but I can't wait to hear your thoughts about it in just a few minutes after I break this masterful 1996 World War destruction alien invasion movie down. So for those of you that have not seen Independence Day, this movie takes place over the course of several days. Actually, beginning on July 2nd, the aliens invade. We're introduced to Captain Stephen Hiller. We're also introduced to President Whitmore. We're also introduced to David Levinson and a whole handful of other characters that will do what they can to keep the United States and the world out of alien harm's way. After the aliens show up, we learn early on, based off of David Levinson's research, that they have hidden a signal within the satellite system of our own. So basically, they are using our own satellites against us and trying to keep us from figuring out exactly what they're planning to do. Now, you know, there's always that whole thing back and forth of, are the aliens going to be friendly? Are they going to be hostile? Even Robert Loggia's character asks President Whitmore,
and what happens if they do become hostile? And God help us.
Watching this now as an adult for the first time, as I said, in a very long time, and after I've been introduced to Arrival,
Oh, yeah.
I could see where you would really question whether or not they have hostile intentions, because Arrival came in similar way. A bunch of alien craft came down, they didn't land, and then they just sat there.
Right, yeah. Which is pretty crazy because after these alien ships end up in the Earth's atmosphere, we as an audience end up finding out that these are 15-mile wide alien spacecrafts that are centering over the city of Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, Washington, D.C., Russia, and Moscow, and Iraq. I mean, literally all over the world.
London, New Delhi.
Yeah. And David Levinson, played by Jeff Goldblum, starts to realize as he's figuring out this hidden signal that is in our own satellite system that they're basically playing a game of chess, which is very cool because we actually meet David Levinson while he's playing a game of chess with his father.
Mm-hmm.
So he starts to figure out that...
Tell her to pack up and leave town.
Why? What happened?
Just do it!
Oh, Ma, listen. Get your stuff together and head for Anna's. Don't argue with me, just go! David, why'd I just send my mother to Atlanta? David, talk to me.
Hear me tell you that the signal hidden in the satellite feed is slowly recycling down to extinction?
Not really.
Countdown.
A countdown? Wait, a countdown to what, David?
It's like in chess. First, you strategically position your pieces, then when the timing's right, you strike. See? They're positioning themselves all over the world, using this one signal to synchronize their efforts. In approximately 6 hours, the signal's going to disappear and the countdown's going to be over.
And then what?
Checkmate.
And for you and I, spending most of our lives in either Los Angeles or San Francisco, all of these movies that are like this, or disaster movies, it's always these giant cities, then we're totally going to be fucked.
Yep. Completely taken out.
Yeah.
So in the midst of David Levinson figuring all this out, we also learned that he has an ex-wife that is actually part of the cabinet of the White House. So he's trying to get in touch with her to warn the United States government, aka the president, know that these aliens actually have malicious intent. And she is not really interested in listening to him because, of course, they're divorced. This was next to Mrs. Doubtfire, one of the first movies that I think I might have actually been introduced to divorce, because as a kid when this movie came out, I think it was only 10 years old. And I remember begging my parents to take me to see this movie for months after it was released. And thankfully, they finally relented and took me to see it in the theaters, which actually they took me to see this at the Mall movie theater, which was where I first saw the Lost World Jurassic Park in, and Men in Black in. So this was actually a very significant movie theater for me growing up.
Yeah, and it's crazy you mentioned Mrs. Doubtfire because two of the actors from Mrs. Doubtfire are in this film.
Exactly. I know. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, David Levinson's boss is Robin Williams' brother, who helps him get a makeover. Uncle Jack and Aunt Frank.
That's right, yes.
Uncle
Harvey
Frank and Aunt
Firestein.
Jack. Yeah.
He's had that voice since the early 90s,
forever.
too, so it's just getting worse.
And Randy Quaid's daughter in this film is actually one of Daniel's daughters in Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yes, exactly, played by Robin Williams, who also plays Mrs. Doubtfire. So after a little bit of time, David ends up convincing his father, Julius, played by Judd Hirsch, that they need to drive to Washington so that he can get in touch with Constance and President Whitmore and just give them this information about the fact that these aliens are using our own satellites against us. And, one thing leads to another. David Levinson and Julius are admitted into the White House, and this is a great moment in the White House because watching the BTS, a lot of this moment with Judd Hirsch was actually improvised, where he comes in to the White House and goes, I didn't know I was going to meet the president today, and if I had known, I would have worn a tie. I mean, look at me. I look like a schlemiel. And it's hilarious. I've always thought that line was hysterical.
David, see if they've got one of those pens.
Yeah, right. See if they've got those pens that they give away. And he's like, Dad, what? So President Whitmore is finally brought into this room with David and his father, and we end up also finding out there's a little bit of animosity between David Levinson and President Whitmore. David thinks that his wife, Constance, actually left him for the president, but she really only left him because it was just a big, huge opportunity for her in her career in politics. And President Whitmore's like, I really don't have time for this. Constance convinces President Whitmore to listen to David. David tells him a whole thing about how they're using these satellites against us, about line of sight, and about how the clock is ticking and we really don't have a whole lot of time before the aliens end up attacking us. And for the rest of the movie, we are gifted an epic hour and 50 minutes, because this movie is 2 hours and 25 minutes, actually exactly the length of Born on the 4th of July, so this works out in one way or another.
Uh-huh.
The United States and other prominent countries that have military capacity to take down this alien species that is now trying to invade and destroy the world, and this actually includes the President of the United States, David, and his father, and Captain Stephen Hiller, who we met earlier, played by Will Smith, all ending up in the government quiet room of Area 51 to try and figure out a way to take down this alien species and not destroy the planet Earth.
I love Area 51 so much, and I absolutely love when Julius is going off on the president like, hey, don't yell at my son. He saved all of your asses, and you guys all knew that this was coming in Area 51 in the 50s when this crashed, and of course, as an audience member, you're like, oh my God, shut up, old man. Like, oh, this is so cringy. Right. You're embarrassing yourself and your son, blah, blah, blah. Everybody's shining on going, yeah, old man, whatever. And of course, his director of defense, who's former CIA head, goes, actually,
that's not entirely accurate. Yeah. Oh gosh. And then he's like, David's like, what? Which part? I love that moment.
We must launch. A delay now would be more costly than when you waited to evacuate the cities.
No, you're not going to launch nuclear weapons. You're going to kill them and us at the same time. If we fire nukes and everybody else who's got it is going to fire them, you know what that means? Fallout. You ever hear of nuclear winter? It's the end of life as we know it. Do you hear what they're talking about? Don't even think about it. I don't have to go. It can't be allowed.
Shut up, Captain. Get him out of here. Hey, don't tell him to shut up. You'd all be dead now if it wasn't my David. None of you did anything to prevent this.
There was nothing we could do. We were totally unprepared for this.
Ah! Don't give me unprepared.
Come on, Julius.
It was what, in the 50s, whatever. You had that spaceship.
Dad.
No, Dad. Yeah, that thing that you found in New Mexico.
Dad.
Where was that?
Not the spaceship.
Was that Roswell, New Mexico, yeah. No, you had the spaceship, and you had the bodies. They were all locked up in a bunker. Where was that? David.
I don't know.
Area 51, right? Area 51. You knew then. And you did nothing.
Sir, regardless of what you may have read in the tabloids, there have never been any spacecraft recovered by our government. Take my word for it. There's no Area 51. There's no recovered spaceship.
Excuse me, Mr. President. That's not entirely accurate.
What? Which part?
Yeah, that whole sequence is so great. And that's, of course, after the aliens do end up attacking all the major cities that they've planted their 15-mile wide alien spacecraft above, one prominent piece of building or architecture that would look awesome being blown up.
Like Empire State Building,
Yeah, the IBM building in downtown Los Angeles and the White House.
Yeah.
So, yeah, all over the world.
I'm sure it would have been the Transamerica building in San Francisco.
Oh, I'm sure it would have been, yeah. But Los Angeles was the chosen city for the state of California for this movie. So the audience of ours, V, knows that this is my second favorite film of all time. I, similar to Jurassic Park, watch this movie 4 to 5 times a year. You have not watched this movie in several years, over a decade, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think on your revisit to 1996's Independence Day?
God, I hate this film.
Oh, no.
No, I'm totally kidding.
I figured as much because you weren't looking at me when you said it.
I'm a terrible liar. You know it.
You kind of are, yeah.
It's a quality. It's a good quality to have.
Yes, it is. But it works out. It's all good.
In fact, I had a lot of trepidation going into this week because I know it's one of your favorite films, and this movie is often laughed at nowadays, right? It's it's the big 90s blockbuster. They were so ridiculous and tried to tug at your heartstrings, and it was so obvious or whatever, right? And this movie isn't taken seriously at all these days by most people.
No, it's not. It's unfortunate.
And so I came into it going like, okay, this is going to be a little bit over the top, but just prepare yourself. And now as an adult watching this film, it is so fucking epic.
Yes.
This movie is awesome. And I love it more now than I did when I was a kid.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, because
Yay.
I understand so much more in terms of the character dynamics between David and Constance and, of course, President Whitmore and that whole thing and the power dynamics there. Why it mattered that Steven was really nervous that he was dating a stripper and he wanted to get into NASA. And I was like, who fucking cares? When I was in my 20s, I was like, oh, in the 90s, I get how that could be a problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And I understand all the subplots now and the little pieces about this movie now. And this and the visual effects and the CGI in this film hold up so spectacularly well. It was
hell yeah, they do.
So fun to watch this on my big TV with surround sound.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, how did I used to watch this in the 90s on like a 32-inch TV in my parents' living room?
I know, right? Yeah, on a VHS with, your Zenith TV.
It's just a crime against this film to watch it on that.
Totally. I used to watch it on a 13-inch TV, a VCR combo.
Exactly.
And just like had it at like 63 volume and just like, yeah! Now I have a Bose sound bar and I'm just like sitting here rumbling with every explosion. It's so great.
From the beginning of this film, I was completely in when they're at the SETI Institute listening for audio from space and they're playing It's the End of the World as We Know It from REM.
And you recognized that actor, I'm sure.
Give me flies! Lucas! Anyone but you.
The first opening line of the movie, other than Neil Armstrong's speech, is, "If this is not an insanely beautiful woman, I'm hanging up." I love that line so much.
I love him so much. He's from The Mummy. For anybody who, didn't recognize that quote, he's the museum curator that Rachel Weisz works for.
Allah rest their souls.
And I know this was billed as Will Smith's big blockbuster. Of course, he had a banging 90s with this, Men in Black, etc. But from the moment I watched this movie as a kid, all the way to now, and especially now, I always had a thing for Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that
because nerd.
Yeah, oh, totally. And I really resonated with Goldblum when I first saw this movie for the first time. I only saw this movie one time in theaters, and again, I was literally on my knees begging my parents to take me to see this movie because my parents used to go out with like their church friends and go to the movies, and they would go see Jurassic Park and this and Ace Ventura and all these other movies, and I was just like, I am a kid, I like aliens, I want to see an alien movie, take me to see Independence Day. Like I had seen E.T., Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and Jurassic Park, and I was like, just take me to see Independence Day. Why won't you take me to see Independence Day? And I remember my mom one day being like, John, it's a scary theme. And I was like, I'll be fine. And then like 2 weeks later, my parents took my sister and I to see it. I'll always remember my mom covering my sister's eyes during Jasmine's whole, stripper sequence.
Of course.
But my dad never covered my eyes, so thanks, Dad, for that. I appreciate that. But still, loved the movie as a kid. My dad always says to me, do you remember that pivotal moment in Independence Day when you actually cheered louder than anybody else in the theater? And I was like, oh, I totally remember that. Yeah, I was 11 years old. I was all in to Independence Day. And as much as I loved aliens, this movie obviously makes you more human than wanting to be like, oh, let's invite the aliens into our lives, right?
Yeah. And it reminded me of this recent trilogy that a Chinese author had written. It's called The Three-Body Problem.
Oh, okay. I've heard of this one.
Oh, it's a fantastic sci-fi series. Highly recommend it to anyone who reads. And
okay.
And it poses a very fascinating question about life in the universe and how life should approach other life. And this movie really reminded me of that series, and I highly recommend it.
Okay, I will have to add that to my watch list or read list then.
Also, regarding Independence Day, other than films, who the fuck ever puts keys in the visor? Ever. We need our dads.
I totally understand.
Right? We need our dads or some older people in our lives to tell us if this was ever actually a thing.
I'm completely with you on that, because every time I've watched this movie, since I got it on VHS, I'm like, why would there be keys in the visor? especially after all the mayhem. It's like, would the key still be there? Of
Right?
course,
Yeah.
this is one of those movies that, you suspend
Good point.
disbelief, right? However, it's still so much authenticity, so much humanity
it's
in this movie.
Realistic.
You buy into everything.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's no forced comedy, even though there is
Thank
comedy,
God.
absolutely. But it's not forced, similar to The Mummy, right? Like, you think back to, you think forward to The Mummy, which was 3 years after this movie.
Or Men in Black.
Or Men in Black, exactly, which was the year after this, which when we did Men in Black, Will Smith did not want to do another sci-fi movie because he had just come off of this one.
Right.
So you think, like, okay, this movie's fucking fantastic. Like, there's literally, like, no other way in the 90s that this movie could have been any better. And the funny thing is, Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich actually wanted this movie to come out to have a July release for 1996 because they had heard that Tim Burton was working on a movie called Mars Attacks that was planning to come out the summer of 1996. So this movie got fast-tracked. They shot this movie in 72 days.
What?
Yes, and I'll get into a little bit
Holy
more of the
shit.
behind-the-scenes and the miniatures and all the CGI and all the special effects and all that stuff in a minute. But July 3rd of 1996 was when Independence Day was released. So Warner Brothers, after this movie was released and its success, which we will get into shortly,
Oh, God, yeah.
decided to push Mars Attacks from summer to Christmas of 1996.
Smart move.
Very smart move indeed.
Warner Brothers produced Mars Attacks. Who produced Independence Day?
20th Century Fox, which is now Disney.
Oh, my God. Wait, why isn't this
So
film
Independence Day is now
available?
a Disney movie.
That's why it was available on Hulu.
Ah, there you go. So you watched it on Hulu.
I did, yeah.
All right, cool. I'm sure it looked great. I have the Blu-ray. I have the VHS with the holographic cover where the White House is being blown up.
We had that too.
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah.
That was
You
such a
had to have
badass
it.
cover.
I will never forget the morning of Christmas Day that I opened this movie. What happened was I opened it, and it wasn't sealed very well. So the tape actually fell out of the jacket on the floor, and I freaked out. And my parents were like, "It's fine, it's fine, it's fine." I'm like, "Oh, I want to make sure it's okay." So I went into my room at like 6 o'clock in the morning and put it in and like fast forwarded it the entire movie and made sure that it was fine. But I had the holograph of the White House being blown up. I've also owned the 4-disc DVD version, which is theatrical, director's cut, and 2 discs of special features, and now I have the Blu-ray because we have not yet been gifted a 4K release of Independence Day. But I'm going to tell you right now, the director's cut of Independence Day is chef's kiss, because there is like 7 to 9 minutes of additional footage that takes place at Area 51 that brings so much more of the story to light. That is just like, holy shit, this movie is literally one of the greatest movies ever made.
You need to show that to me the next time I come over.
Oh, you better
I've never
believe
seen
it.
I've never seen the extended cut.
Not a whole lot of people have. There's a lot of people out there that literally don't know it exists.
I didn't until the other day when you said, which version did you watch? And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about?
I know. It's great.
And thank God it's on Hulu, because Netflix as a streamer has horrible audio conversion. The compression
they really
on
do.
Netflix is just trash, but Hulu and Disney Plus in general has fantastic audio. And
and HBO and Apple TV.
Yeah,
and
it's really
Apple
only
streaming.
Netflix that sucks ass.
Yeah, Netflix sucks. They just suck.
They just haven't prioritized that codec or coding it for digital compression or something, but it's very disappointing.
It is. So, getting into a little bit of the behind the scenes before I run out of time, because I could talk about this movie all damn day, similar to Jurassic Park. 80% of the movie was shot with miniatures. Obviously, you're thinking about special effects and stuff like that. Yeah. 20% was done with CGI, and we're in 2024. The movie came out in 1996, so you're thinking
it holds
almost 30 years, similar to Jurassic Park, holds up so very well.
Yeah.
The U.S. military was in full support of this movie up until they read the script. When Area 51 was mentioned, they pulled all of their support because they did not want to actually be part of perpetuating of the idea that Area 51 actually existed.
So
now,
that's admitting by omission is what's really happening.
That's what I'm saying. And my mother's father, who never fully admitted to it, actually had been to Area 51.
Very cool.
My mother's father was a genius. My grandfather, absolute mind boggler of a human being. The experiments that he told me about up until literally weeks before he died have blown my mind forever. And I will always be grateful for the fact that I had that time with him and that he trusted me enough to be old enough to understand what he was dealing with. And I remember asking him, I was like, Grandpa, have you ever been to Area 51? He goes, have you ever heard the term, if I tell you I have to kill you? And I was like, I've heard that term. And he goes, well, there you go. I can't actually confirm nor deny. So I feel like my grandfather has actually spent $20,000 on a hammer, $30,000 on a toilet seat.
You know, some of my buddies that have been in the military previously, they have actually talked about military budget with me before. And one of the things they've talked about is how in the Department of the Defense or the Pentagon, they'll just remodel a wing of it. Not that it needs it, but it's so they don't ever go under their budget. So Congress can't argue that they need less money.
Exactly.
And I was so pissed when he told me that.
I know. So crazy.
This is why I don't pay my taxes.
Yeah, there you go. The script for Independence Day was written over a 3 to 4 week period in Mexico. Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich actually had just come off the production of Kurt Russell and James Spader on Stargate.
Yeah,
I love Stargate. Love Stargate. So awesome. These guys ended up shooting this script to several different studios. Offers were pouring in the next day, and the following Monday, they started pre-production. So 20th Century Fox bought it, and they began pre-production right away. Patrick Tatopoulos, who we have discussed many different times on this podcast, a fantastic special effects, practical effects creator. He was the one that created the aliens for this movie. Similar to Stan Winston.
Good.
It was like, early 90s, Patrick Tatopoulos and Stan Winston Studios were like the two go-tos.
Yeah.
And I'm, as much as I love Stan Winston, especially for Jurassic Park, I think Patrick Tatopoulos was the right choice for Independence Day because he presented the biomechanical suit and the actual alien inside the biomechanical suit to Roland Emmerich. And Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin were both like, well, how about the little alien is actually inside the big alien? And that's how we got the aliens being a little bit more fragile than, they wanted to come off as.
God, it's such a cool concept.
So awesome. And as a kid, I actually had the alien toy that you pushed a button in the back and it opened up.
Opened up. Yeah.
Yes. And the little guy was in there. Oh, hell yeah. And and one of my favorite comedic moments in this movie is Brent Spiner as Dr. Oaken. He comes in and he goes, "Oh, why don't you want to see them?" And he brings them into that room. He says, "This is what we call the freak show." I love that moment. And he shows them the 3 aliens that died back in Roswell. And I had 3 aliens in a little tube, no liquid or anything because it was toys you bought at Target or Walmart. But, I still had those little aliens. I had, oh my gosh, I got the 3D puzzle of the White House because I wanted to do my own destruction of the White House based off this movie. And there was another toy that I got that had 3 of the buildings in downtown LA that you put on top of this little spring. And if you hit the spring correctly, it would explode. And I'm not lying to you. I have an 8-hour tape of me in my living room in Palmdale throwing cars after I had recorded the destruction of all these cities on my little tape recorder. And I just threw these cars and blew up these things. Next time you're over, if I have a VHS player, I'll show it to you because next to Jurassic Park, I reenacted everything. And I even drew out the entirety of Independence Day on a flip book where I did the opening through the end of the movie on 200 pages of blank sheet paper. I sat in my room and drew this movie from beginning to end. This movie and Jurassic Park were the 2 movies that just completely blew my imagination out of the water. So I love this movie, and I'm going to get into a little bit more of the BTS right now. So this movie does hold the record for the most miniature work done in the 90s for a feature film.
That's awesome, and it's got to be the most miniature work since Star Wars.
I would think so.
Right?
Yeah, it's very, very impressive. The second disc on the Blu-ray and the DVD, there's like 4 hours of behind-the-scenes featurettes that really dive deep into how they blew up the White House, the Empire State Building, and how they actually did.
I had no idea those were miniatures.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Isn't that crazy? That's another thing about this movie, and similar to Jurassic Park, you watch this movie, and it's like they literally destroyed New York, and they destroyed the White House.
They did such a great job on the lighting of that to make that realistic.
Oh, yeah. No, it's absolutely incredible. There were many sequences in this movie, especially in L.A., Washington, D.C., and New York City, where they built a 20-foot-long, 8-foot-wide miniature of the streets. And the special effects supervisor had told Roland Emmerich that they are going to have to do a lot of this in computer-generated imaging. And Emmerich was like, no, you know what? I think I can do it in camera. So what they did was they put it standing up on its end, and you know how fire rises, right? So they just ignited the fire, and boom, there it is, all in camera, done practically 100%. Awesome. Absolutely fucking phenomenal. So all of that you see, now granted, of course, there's some CGI, cars flying and people running and all that stuff.
The spaceships.
Yes, of course. But the fire and everything like that, all practically done in a studio and just looks absolutely amazing.
Well, after no spoilers here, everyone knows our motto is practical effects are best.
Yes, exactly. There's a scene that I'm sure everybody remembers when Captain Stephen Hiller actually ejects himself and says, "Welcome to Earth" to the alien. He's dragging the one alien with his dreadlocks, outside of his parachute. That
and
was
what the
shot
hell is
on,
that smell?
That's exactly where I'm going.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. That was shot on the salt flats outside of Salt Lake City. And that ended up actually, what the hell was that smell, ended up being an improvised scene and dialogue from Will Smith. Because at the salt flats, there are crustaceans called brine shrimp that actually live on the surface, but when they die, they sink to below the surface, and it ends up being really, really seafood smelling and disgusting.
It smells like low tide out there. I've been out there.
Go.
It's
awful.
All
right. I have not.
Yeah, it's
well,
awful.
There you go. So that was actually an improvised dialogue from Will Smith, and everybody liked it so much that they kept it in the movie.
Well, and they even reference it later on in the movie about how much they smell.
Yes, yeah, yeah, that's right. Dr. Hogan's like, this is really one smelly, disgusting. I love Brent Spiner. I worked with him on Star Trek Picard, and
because he's Data.
The man, yes, he's Data. He was so gracious to let me just gush about him playing Dr. Oaken.
Oh, I bet he doesn't get that very often. I bet there's just a lot of Trekkies who come up to him.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So I bet
he was
tickled.
He was like, you know what, man, that's so cool that you love Independence Day. I'm like, I really do, and I am a Trekkie. I love First Contact. I love Next Generation. I love these movies, but Independence Day, you as Dr. Oaken, absolutely. He shook my hand and was like, thank you for telling me that. I'm like, you're so welcome, and thank you for letting me be a fanboy for a minute outside of a con, like on set itself. Yeah. So that was really, really awesome. And actually, speaking of improvisation, Jeff Goldblum and Judd Hirsch improvised all their scenes together.
That makes me so happy.
I know, right? And Will Smith and Jeff Goldblum improvised all their scenes together.
Jesus.
Yeah, really, really awesome.
What is it with you and the fat lady?
I know. So great. Oh, I love that. And I'm a big cigar fan. So even now, over the last 10 years, I've become more of a cigar fan. And watching this movie, I'm like, oh, this is totally a celebration cigar, And I love when they're walking into Area 51 and they're about to get on the plane and goes, oh, damn, almost put a hex on the whole damn thing. I need some cigars. And Judd Hirsch's like, my last two. And I say my last two to so many people in the world, and they just don't get it. And that's totally fine,
Aww.
Now, one of the best moments in Independence Day is President Whitmore's speech right before the entire world goes up against the aliens in this movie. That speech was shot on August 6th of 1995. In the original script, after the speech was done, he was supposed to jump down and just get put up in his Air Force garb and whatnot to get into the F-18. When he finished that scene, the script did not call for anybody to cheer or clap or anything, but everybody was so taken with the way that Bill Pullman delivered that speech, they erupted. All those cameras just happened to get the eruption of cheers and, salutes and all that stuff to Bill Pullman / President Whitmore for that fantastic Independence Day speech, which it still just completely blows me away.
For the last 15 years or so, I always thought of that speech being a bit hackneyed, just like trying a little too hard, right? And I don't, similar to the movie, right? I just thought, oh no, it's 90s cheeseball. And I watched it this time around, and I was like, God damn, sign me up. Like, I'm with you, man. Like, I'll follow you into the fire. And I was like, holy shit, this is like second to Braveheart in terms of military speeches.
Fuck yeah.
It's very
so
rousing.
Awesome. It really is. Oh, man. Like I said, I clapped. My wife was asleep in the bedroom, and I was in my theater room, and I just applauded. And I mean, there's so many moments in this movie that I applaud, but that was one of those moments where I was like, oh yeah. And I love it. It's great. And Bill Pullman,
he's so
good. The crazy thing also about this movie is that Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich had originally written President Whitmore for Kevin Spacey.
No.
I know, right? Well,
No.
Dean Devlin and Kevin Spacey went to high school together, so Dean Devlin wanted to incorporate Spacey in this movie, but it didn't end up working out, and we got Bill Pullman, and I'm just so grateful that we got Bill Pullman.
Spacey does not have the gravitas for that. Bill Pullman was fantastic as President Whitmore. I want him to be the president. He was such a badass and just level-headed, and I understood all the criticism in the beginning of the film.
Yeah, right?
Now as an adult.
As you get older, I totally get it.
And so that informs a lot of his decisions when the aliens come. Now he's regretful. Oh, this makes sense now. I just connected so many pieces now. I watched it as an older person.
Yeah, it really comes together. And I love early on, too, as the exposition of who President Whitmore is. We get that, the shot on the TV is like, are President Whitmore's actions A, ultra brave, or B, foolhardy? Morton. Leadership as a pilot in the Gulf War is much different than leadership in politics. So you're getting an exposition on who President Whitmore was before he was the president. It's just so brilliant.
It's natural exposition is chef's kiss.
It really is. But going back a little bit more to the behind the scenes, there were a lot of female visual effects artists on this movie, which really made me happy.
Awesome.
Which was awesome. Yeah, so I'm going to read you a lot of the visual effects numbers here. So there were 3,878 F-18 Hornet fighter jets in this movie that were CGI.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. 1,500 smoke trails.
Okay.
52,278 pieces of debris.
This is giving Lord of the Rings a run for its money.
A little bit. 3,931 alien attackers, their little minion planes that take over on the F-18s, which is just one of the most grandiose airstrike fucking battles of all time. 22,000 light balls.
Okay.
92 alien shields.
Those shields are badass.
So awesome. And 1,500 missiles shot from the F-18s.
How can you do work that is that tedious and not lose your mind?
I know. Yeah, and when I tell you the production length, well, and now granted this was just shooting production there. I don't actually have a lot of information on how long the special effects and visual effects took.
Months.
But production,
it had to be months. If they were shooting in August, I bet you they did not finish the post on this film, not even the editing, but just like the visual effects work until at least January.
Probably, yeah. This movie did go into production on July 28th of 1995 and wrapped on October 8th of 1995. So there was a 72-day shooting schedule for all of everybody, that's involved
all the practical stuff. Yeah.
All the practical stuff, yeah. Will Smith was actually cast because Roland Emmerich loved him in a movie called 6 Degrees of Separation from 1994, 1995.
Which stars Donald Sutherland.
Oh, well, there we go. Look at that.
Yeah.
I did not know that. And Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin were hard charged on casting Will Smith, but there was a lot of racism coming from the studios about them wanting to cast him. And Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin stood their ground, and finally the studio relented, and they ended up agreeing to cast Will Smith, which, after this movie, Men in Black, etc., he became a very bankable star for a lot of studios.
Which is why it's so crazy that all these people nowadays are saying Hollywood is so woke and so liberal. And I'm like, there is so much sexism and racism in Hollywood. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, it's insane. It's nuts. Now, V, I think you'll like this piece of trivia. The White House interiors were built for a movie that you picked several episodes ago.
So that would be Dave or the American president?
Only for the American president. There was a delay in shooting while they were shooting production at LAX, which is the airport in Los Angeles, because there was a threat from the Unabomber.
Oh, that's right. I remember all the
nuts.
news about him, yeah.
I know. So crazy. Dr. Oaken, played by Brent Spiner, was actually based on the digital effects supervisor on Stargate. His name was Jeffrey Oaken, and he looked exactly how Brent Spiner looks in this movie, which I thought was a great nod to the fact that they really enjoyed working with that guy.
Perfect.
Dean Devlin was the second unit director on this movie, and he was very excited to work with Harry Connick Jr. and have him improvise a lot of different celebrities. And in the movie, we get his Jesse Jackson improvisation, which I thought was pretty great. Now, David Arnold wrote this score for this movie, which I gotta say, next to John Williams' score in Jurassic Park, is one of my favorites of the 90s. Just fantastic. I love it very much. He ended up locking himself in a Los Angeles hotel room for 4 months because he was so stressed out about the fact that he was not going to be able to come up with a score that would match the energy and match the images that we were seeing on screen.
And the magnitude.
And the magnitude, exactly. And he also had a lot of trouble because anytime he looked outside of the window, there were helicopters flying banners of Independence Day coming out in 1996.
No, he should.
So he had a lot of problems.
Cabin on the beach up in Oregon or something.
Exactly, yeah. Now, this movie came out in July of 1996, July 3rd, to be exact, right before Independence Day. I saw it, I think, a month after it had come out, so I had seen it in August. And the beautiful thing about this movie and this episode this week, it is July 3rd of 2024. This film came out July 3rd of 1996, 28 years ago. Oh, so awesome that it holds up so well 28 years later.
Yes, happy anniversary. It's so cool that it lines up with the release date of this episode.
I know. How magical is that?
We can tell everybody you planned it that way.
All right, perfect. This was the second film to cross the $500 million mark in the worldwide box office.
Oh, yeah. This thing was everywhere.
Oh, yeah. This was the movie of 1996. There was a $24 million advertising campaign put aside for this movie. There was a $1.3 million paycheck paid to the advertisers at the Super Bowl, which the Super Bowl showed the first time that the White House was blown up in any of the trailers and TV spots, which got everybody completely excited for this movie. There was also a screening before the Super Bowl, and nobody knew what they were seeing until the title showed up that said Independence Day, and the theater erupted and would not stop cheering for the first 10 minutes of the movie. And then Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin finally realized that the movie had been out of sync for about 5 minutes. So they stopped the movie, turned the lights on, and the crowd would not stop cheering. And finally they got it back into sync and everything, and they started the movie again, and everybody absolutely loved it. And for 6 months, this movie was sold out throughout the entirety of the United States.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Absolutely epic piece of sci-fi cinema. Absolute patriotic sci-fi cinema, if you really think about it. The movie had a $75 million budget.
That is not that much given how many special effects there are.
I know. The domestic box office was $306.1 million. The worldwide box office was $817.4 million, making this the second highest grossing film of the 90s next to Jurassic Park.
You're a populist.
I absolutely am. Love these movies so much. Now we go into the highest grossing films every now and then, so we're going to do it for the year 1996, even though I've done the year 1996 a few times here. Number 2 was Twister. Number 3 was Mission Impossible. Number 9, the live-action version of 101 Dalmatians. Number 14, a future pick of mine, Star Trek First Contact. Number 17, Broken Arrow. Number 22, a past pick of mine, 12 Monkeys. Number 25, another past pick of mine, Jingle All the Way. Number 28, another past pick of mine, Dragonheart. Number 33, Beavis and Butthead Do America. Number 39, another past pick of mine, Romeo and Juliet. Number 38, Happy Gilmore. Number 45, Muppet Treasure Island. Number 55, a favorite sequel of mine, Father of the Bride Part 2. Number 58, V, a past pick of yours, James and the Giant Peach. Number 74, V, another pick of yours, of Scream. And the highest grossing film of 1996, my film pick of this week, Independence Day. And it was nominated for 2 Oscars.
Awesome.
Nominated for Best Sound.
Okay.
And nominated for Best Visual Effects, which it won for!
There's no other movie that could have won. That was spectacular
Exactly.
visual effects.
Yeah, and again, 98% was miniature, 20% was CGI. So, yeah, this was an absolute must-win for Independence Day.
Definitely.
And that is Independence Day, my second most favorite film of all time ever created. Watch it if you have not. You're missing out on an absolute piece of fucking fantastic cinema. So thank you guys very much for joining us for this episode.
Yay! That was awesome. And it's actually only the second time we've ever picked a top grossing film of the year.
Yeah, I think that's right.
It's like second or third. We very rarely ever do it.
I know, it's crazy.
That was great. Thank you so much for reintroducing me to this film because I had been avoiding it for years. And now I'm happy to rewatch it anytime there's an opportunity. It was so much fun. It's so much better than I remember, which is such a rarity.
Yeah, right?
Highly recommend it. Definitely watch it on Hulu.
Absolutely. Yes. I'm so glad you enjoyed it after all these years. I will never not love this movie. I, again, will always remember the first time I saw it, and ever since then, I still feel similarly to when I watched Jurassic Park again. I feel like a child, and I absolutely love it. And if you haven't seen it, like V said, check it out on Hulu, or just spend the money and buy the Blu-ray, because it just looks and sounds amazing on Blu-ray too.
I'm so excited for it to come out on 4K for you.
Oh, I know. I can't wait. So, V, I'm curious. Would you watch Born on the 4th of July with your grandmother?
No. I would be willing to watch it with my parents, though, now that I'm an adult. There's a lot of graphic violence. There's a lot of torturous scenes. Now, there isn't any torture, but it's torturous to watch, is what I mean.
Definitely.
There are a couple of scenes in brothels, but it's nothing graphic there. It's just such an intense film that it's going to traumatize you if you're not old enough to watch it. But my father, as I said, both my parents are very anti-war, and so, of course, it's right up their alley. I think they saw it back in the early 90s. I do think they've both seen this film before, but anyone over 17 and above should absolutely watch this film. It's so important, especially for the conversation around what is patriotism, how do we handle treating our vets. Anytime we can have a conversation around eliminating blind patriotism is an important conversation to have.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So please, let's keep having it. But then other times, it's nice to have fictional blind patriotism like Independence Day. So John, would you watch Independence Day with your grandma?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know how many times I watched it with my grandmother and my grandfather. I remember going to the movies after Independence Day had come out. I think I was going to see Sphere or something like that with my grandfather, and there was a trailer for Mars Attacks, and my grandfather thought it was Independence Day. I was like, Grandpa, that movie's been out for a few months already. So I know I've seen Independence Day with both my grandfather and my grandmother on my mother's side. So yeah, definitely. And even if they were still around, I'm sure my grandmother would like to watch it because it's such a great movie.
Yeah, and I would say 11 or 12 and above. The scenes at Area 51 with the aliens scared the crap out of me when I was a little kid the first time I watched it.
Oh, for sure.
I was only like 11 when I watched this film.
Yeah.
And so that's the one piece that I would say just be a little bit careful as a parent, but otherwise, it's fantastic summer blockbuster.
Yeah, and it's funny because, again, been watching it since it came out in theaters, but that whole sequence when the alien wakes up still just terrifies the hell out of me.
It's a good jump scare.
So
for sure.
scary. Oh, yeah. Just so good. Sweet. Well, that is episode 116. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Please do rate, review, subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, all of the podcast platforms. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. And we love interacting with our listeners and having discussions with you through DM or comments. And it's really just a joy for us to continually talk movies, not only with each other, but with you as well. So please do continue to interact with us. We really enjoy spending time with our listeners. And next week, since last week we were going to jump into these movies, but unfortunately we did lose Donald Sutherland, so hopefully you listeners enjoyed our Donald Sutherland in memoriam episode. We are going to be going into the movies that we were originally going to do before Donald Sutherland did pass away. So, V, why don't you tell everybody, in case they forgot, what your pick for next week will be?
We're going to stay on this 90s blockbuster train, and I picked one of the all-time greats from the 90s. This stars Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves. This is Speed.
Yeah.
And what 90s blockbuster did you pick?
I chose the Sean Connery, Nicolas Cage, Ed Harris, Michael Biehn, Cool Beans movie, directed by Michael Bay, produced by Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson, The Rock.
I can't wait to hear about the behind-the-scenes craziness that is Jerry Bruckheimer.
Oh, yeah, I know. I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, those two together, him and Michael Bay,
they did a lot together.
They were box office gold in the 90s, that's for sure.
That's for sure. Sweet. Well, I cannot wait to get into that one. And as always, here at Movies You Missed, we do love to close out with film is a form of art, and in art all opinions are valid. Except if you think
the 4th of July
will no longer be known as an American holiday.
In less than an hour, aircraft from here will join others from around the world. And you will be launching the largest aerial battle in the history of mankind. Mankind, that word should have new meaning for all of us today. We can't be consumed by our petty differences anymore. We will be united in our common interest. Perhaps it's fate that today is the 4th of July, and you will once again be fighting for our freedom. Not from tyranny, oppression, or persecution, but from annihilation. We're fighting for our right to live, to exist. And should we win the day, the 4th of July will no longer be known as an American holiday, but as the day when the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day.